Okay, so I'm making a screencast of one or two of the questions from 2016 paper one, the ordinary level maths. So we've done a certain number of the questions. I'm just going to scroll down to where we left off. I'm assuming that'll be question 7. So bear with me. This will be a rough and ready screencast, but aren't they the best kind? Now, this question 7 here is a finance question. So there's an awful lot of reading, an awful lot of information. Okay. I would suggest you write down, underline, or color, highlighter, whatever way you do it, to highlight the parts that are important. So let's read the questions worth 55 marks. Paul has €8,000 that he wants to invest for a maximum of 3 years. His local bank is offering him 2 options, option 1 and option 2, as shown in the table below. So which option is the best one? It's probably going to be asked at some stage. Option 1 gives you 2% interest in year 1, 3% interest in year 2, 5% interest in year 3. You can take money out at the end of year 1 or 2 without penalty. Now, option 2 is a compound interest situation. It's 3.7% over 3 years, but you can't take out any money until the end of the 3rd year. Now, find the value of the investment. This is part A. At the end of 3 years, if Paul chooses option 1 and does not take any money out. This is pretty straightforward. You have to work out how much interest Paul earns in year 2 in year 1. That's simple interest. That interest gets added into the balance. So the 3% of year 2 is going to be a higher amount than the 8,000. You calculate that. You move on then to year 3 and 5% of your new cumulative amount. Okay. So I have an answer now on the next page. I've done year 1. So it's 8,000 by 2% is 160. I add the 160 back on. I end up at 8,160. Now what you could have done here was, to avoid yourself the second step, was multiply the 8,000 by 102%. That one in the answer would include the 8,000 and the 2%. So you would end up going straight to the answer, €8,160. Now that's pretty advanced percentages. Most people learn it by doing the piecemeal. But if you understand what I'm talking about, you can use it. If not, do it the way you find most suitable for yourself. Now year 2, you got a new starting amount. So his money has grown. Now it's 3%. So again, we got 3% of 8,160. That gave us an interest of €244.8. We added that back onto the original balance at the start of that year. We have our new ending amount. So in 2 years, Paul has gained €404.80. Now in year 3, it's at a higher amount, which I see here I haven't put in. That percentage would be 5%. So 5% of 8,404.8 gives you an interest rate of interest earned of €420.24. We add that back onto our starting balance for that year. We end up with our 8,825.04 after 3 years of saving. So that's it. Okay. Now there's many ways. There's not much space here in this question. So like all questions on the Leaving Cert, I say assume it's going to be longer than you expect it to be, and start rationing, maybe starting the left. That's giving you space to move across if you need it, or maybe for a second attempt. And okay, I'll move on to part B now. Now find the value of the investment at the end of 3 years if Paul chooses option 2. Okay, so if you're good at financial maths, this is all lovely bread and butter stuff. You go back. You look here, it was 3.7% compound interest for 3 years. So we're writing that down on the fresh piece of paper. Okay, so I'm going to go straight to the answer. Now, in year 1, you could work out the amount that's earned. You then use that balance for year 2. It was told it was compound interest. And you're multiplying every year by 3.7%. That's one way. It's very similar to the last part. Okay. Now, if you see here, I'm using the 1.037. So the answer, that's 1. When you multiply by 1, you get your answer 8,000 in your answer. And the 0.037 represents 3.7%. Okay. So it's 103.7% divided by 100 gives you 1.037. Now, I apologize if that's not making sense. The way they most probably prefer you to get the answer is by using the compound interest formula. You'll find in the math tables. You'll see it over here on the side. Okay, so each different part. A is the total amount after a certain number of years. P is your principal, your starting money. R is the interest rate, in this case 3.7. And the N is the number of years, in this case 3 years. So I've used the formula here. There's what, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 unknowns, like any equation. I need to know, in this case, 3 of the 4. You can only have one unknown. The unknown here is the value of the investment at the end of 3 years. I put in my principal, start money of 8,000. My interest rate was 3.7 divided by 100, which is the same thing as 0.037. And the number of years is 3. Put that through the calculator. Up comes my answer, 8921.260, the same answer as I got with the other method. Okay, now moving on. Remember, at any stage here, I should have said at the beginning, if you want to pause and give the question a go yourself, and then look at the the answer and the description. So part C here, give one issue other than the rate of interest earned that Paul might take into account when deciding between option 1 and option 2. Now, based on the marking scheme, this was a hit and miss question. I didn't write down how many, but I'm assuming a 5 marker. So if you got it wrong, 0 marks. If you got it right, 5 marks. There was no in between. Now, I personally don't like questions to ask to give your opinion. I would sit back and think about it. Okay, what's happening? And the one issue, obviously, with option 2, Paul can't touch his money. So if something happens, he needs that 8,000. He's stuck. With option 1, he can access the money. And if something happens, he can always withdraw down some of the money and whatever. Okay. So the issue there is he can't touch his money. Okay. Now, the second option there gives an example. I took this from the marking scheme. This says Paul wants to maximize the money he earns. Option 2, okay, he earned 8,921-ish. In option 1, he earned 8,825. So obviously option 2 rather, is the better option. Now, in part D of question 7, again, we have lots of reading to lots of text. Paul would like his investment of 8,000 to amount to 9,000 after 3 years. Okay, what annual rate of compound interest would be required for this to happen? Give your answer as percentage. Now, you've the best method here, other than trying to back work it, which would be pretty awkward, okay, is to use the compound interest formula. Okay, it looks like a tricky formula, but once you know what the different parts mean and your algebra is sound, there should be no major problem. So I've written my formula out there. I've copied over the compound interest formula with the different detail, but we've covered that in the last question. In this case, he wants to earn 9,000. His principal is still 8,000. You're looking for the interest rate that would provide that 9,000. The number of years is still 3. So in this case, your unknown is R. Now, in algebra, which is what we need to do to find what our R is, we need to move numbers away. Eventually, we want to be in a situation where R is on its own. The best thing to do here is to move the 8,000 first. If it's multiplied on the right, when it goes across to the left, it becomes divided. So I end up here. Now that's a number. Okay, put that through your calculator. You're going to get the 9 over 8. Now what I've done here is, in the next step, I've simplified 9,000 over 8,000 to give me 9 over 8. At the same time, I brought the cube across the equal. When you bring something across the equal, it changes to its opposite. The opposite of cubing is cube rooting. Okay, so the third root of 9 over 8. Now that's just a number. You don't know what it is directly. Okay, we'll find out in a second. That's equal to your right hand side now, because everything else has been moved over, the 8,000 and the cube. You're left with 1 plus R over 100. Now, the best thing to do is bring the 1 across. It was added on the right, becomes subtracted on the left. So we end up at this point up here. And we're getting there. We almost have R on its own. To find the R on its own now, what I've done here actually is I've just put that cube root of 9 over 8 minus 1 in the calculator. I end up with a number of 0.04. Now that's looking pretty right at this stage. So if you're okay, it's giving me confidence that what we're doing is the right thing. Again, I want R on its own, so the 1,000 needs to move. Sorry, the 100. It wasn't the right, it was divided, goes to the left, becomes multiplied, the opposite of division. So that's 0.04 times 100, put it through your calculator, your answer is 4. So that's 4%. Now make sure to put the units in. This isn't exactly units, but it's what the question is. The question does say give your answer as a percentage. So if you forget that percent sign, there'll be a deduction to marks. I'm not quite sure exactly what the deduction was in 2016. It probably only 1 mark. Okay, so that's the answer. Now part E, part 1. Again, more text, apologize. Another bank offers to invest his 8,000 in a special fund. The bank has found that in the short term, the money in this fund follows this formula. Now, this is an example of mathematical modeling, where the bank is using its data about the market and then global interest rates to work out something that could describe the future. So your function here, your equation, now it's quadratic, so power 2. Okay, that means you should be able to tell the shape. The shape will be like a mountain on the XY graph. So it would look something like, now I should have had this ready. It would look something, if I graphed it as negative, so it's upside down. Again, when I've got a graph where it crosses the y or the x-axis, is probably going to be important. I can't see it yet. With this kind of question, we're probably going to be asked max and mins at some stage to find the maximum point up here. Okay, so remember that it's your x-axis and your y-axis. Now, like we've always mentioned, if you've got axes involved, which now we haven't got yet, but this potentially is where it's going. At the x-axis, y equals 0. Okay, that's sometimes important. At the y-axis, x is equal to, excuse my bad control of the mouse, x is equal to 0. Now again, that may not be important, but it's something we should always consider, and the more times we hear it, the more it might resonate as something you remember. So if we move on then, okay, so where V, now they're just using the letter V, doesn't matter, okay, is the value of the fund in euro, and T is the time, and you're talking months. Okay, so V and T are the only 2 variables found in the actual equation. Now, the last thing there, part 1, then find the value of the money in the fund after 12 months. So, to my mind, in a question like this, you only have really one option. You're given an equation. You're given a number. Why not throw it in? Now, if you have the ability to see it, T is time, months is time. So you're being told basically that T is 12. Now, the equation is a combination of V and T. There was 2 unknowns. You're being given one of them, so that this is an equation of one unknown. An equation of one unknown can be solved. So I'll flick to the answer just for easiness. There's our equation. Given T equals 12 months. We put it in. Now, this is a perfect example where a calculator does the work. Okay, so be careful that you input it correctly. And we go straight to the answer. That's your V equals 8259.2. Okay, now let's move on. Mary invests 8,000 for 1 year at a certain interest rate. After 1 year, her investment is worth the same amount as the answer to part E1 above. Now, straight away, okay, without anything, I'm going to go and look at the answer for E1, 8259.2. I'm going to write that down. 8259.2, and that's euro. Now, that's considered, okay, you'll probably get the attempt for that, or you will at least for using that number in this part. I'd have to look at the market scheme to be sure, but it usually says use of 8259.2. Sometimes I might say writes 8259.2. I don't have the market scheme open to go check it, but we'll see what happens. Now, find the value of R, correct at 2 decimal places. So I'm going to move on to the answer, just because I have it done. So you've 8,000 by a certain percent equals 259.2. Now, where did I get that 259.2? That's the difference between her investment and the value of the investment after 1 year. So that's the interest earned. Okay. So 8,000 by some percent gives you 259. We're trying to find out what that percent is. Okay. Now if I go ahead and do the 8,000 by R over 100, it ends up being 8,000 R over 100. What I've done is in the same step, I've multiplied that and I've also multiplied across by the 100. Okay, so one could argue I could have done this a different way, but that's the 100 was divided on the left and moves across to the right, it becomes multiplied. So you end up with 8,000 R equals, let's see, 259.2 by 100. Now I didn't actually convert that here. I've left it the way it is, okay, because I realized that I want R on its own. So R on its own. I need to get there, I need to move the 8,000 across. It was multiplied, comes across now, becomes divided. Now it looks kind of messy. Okay, you go, oh, I'm almost making it look harder than it is. But I can just put that entire thing through the calculator and go directly to my answer of R equals 3.24, and that's a percentage. Okay, you multiply something by 100, that's how you get to a percent. Okay, so that's part 2. Now it was deceivingly easy, you could argue, in its solution, but the question itself looks incredibly difficult based on the wording. Don't forget, I've already have it done. I put my answer correct at 2 decimal places. You'll be deducted a mark for forgetting to do that. Okay. Now part 2 is finished, so we're on to question 8. I'm going to stop it there because I'm going to do it question by question, and I'll have a video made for question 8. Just make sure to review back on what we've done there. And if any sections having a problem, it's almost impossible to teach financial maths. The only way is to just practice, remembering that there is a formula to be used, and that currently that's the way it's expected to be done. So I'll leave it at that, and thank you for taking the time to listen to this, and I hope you found it enjoyable.